Hello, I think we're live, and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box, where today it's the Saturday stream. And before we go, I want to bitch and moan about a mouse, not a horrible rodent, but about the thing next to my hand, because there's this little button on the side, which is the backspace button, the go back button. And every time I'm trying to do something useful, which occasionally happens, I press it and I have to do everything again. Now, I know I can go in to the Windows settings and change it. And for the people who hate Windows, I shouldn't have Windows at all. Maybe I should just jump out of one. And Bill Gates would be there saying that, oh, before I land, you have to update, which will take several hours of my life. But anyway, that's my rant over on to the music. And today, it's this show is dedicated to drummers, but it's also dedicated to people who want to understand about more about the anatomy of musical performance. And people always say, who are your favorite drummers? And I say, well, you can go to my YouTube channel and check out a list that I have made of my favorite drummers. And the bad thing about lists is you always inevitably forget someone that you actually like, leave them off the list, and then people feel sad. But I do have a list, and it is relatively comprehensive. But one person who isn't on that list is Frank Sinatra, for the very good reason that Frank Sinatra isn't a drummer. He is the GOAT of vocalists, so far as I'm concerned, my favorite singer of all time. But he is nevertheless the best drum teacher that any drummer will ever have. And the reason for it is because his understanding of what the drummer's role is in just about any modern ensemble is so innate. He sings in a manner in which a drummer should understand music. And for you to understand what I mean by all of this, let's look at the role of the drummer. Is the role of the drummer to keep time? No, that is the role of everyone in an ensemble where there's no conductor. Of course, when there is a conductor, it's the role of the musicians to follow the conductor's lead in terms of where the rhythm, where the time is going. But outside of those situations, think classical orchestras, choirs with a Kapellmeister, choir master, things like that. When you're in a chamber music ensemble, when you're in a jazz combo, when you're in a rock band, when you're in a bluegrass band, when you're in any other kind of conductorless ensemble, musical ensemble, it is everyone's job to keep the time. So to associate that exclusively with drumming is not only an insult to drummers, but it's an insult to everyone else as well. So what is a drummer's role in addition to keeping the time that everyone else is supposed to keep as well? Well, two important things. The drummer shapes the melody. The drummer is, if you will, the womb in which the melody gestates and grows. And much like a child in a mother's womb will take on the characteristics, the genetical qualities of the mother, so too should the rest of the ensemble take on the melodic character being sculpted, being set by the drummer. The drummer is offering very important musical genetic material to the other, to his or her children, if you will. And I know that might sound a bit close encounters of the turd kind, but there you go. So one, the drummer has to shape the melody. He helps to create the melody, to sculpt the melody. And what else does the drummer do? Shapes, creates, and colors the sonic texture of the actual the finished musical product. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, drums are nothing if not an instrument known for unique sounds, because no two drums are alike, no two cymbals are alike. And you could say that this is true of almost every non-electronic musical instrument, but with drums, there's a lot of variation because there's not even an attempt to make every drum sound the same. A piano that's in tune, in the standard tuning for modern pianos, a middle C on piano A should sound at least similar, hopefully, to middle C on piano 2. Obviously, every piano has its own timbre, its own texture, its own unique qualities. But if middle C on piano A sounds like F sharp on piano B, either the tuning is way out of whack or there's some sort of this malfunction with the manufacturing or design of that piano. With drums and cymbals, and frankly, all non pitched percussion instruments, that isn't a problem. The differences are to be, in fact, celebrated. And because of the differences in the drums themselves, drummers have a unique ability to use the drums at their disposal to create a unique sonic texture to the overall musical creation to which everyone can react. Now, dynamics are a big part of that. Drums, when played well, can be very quiet but still very effective. But drums also have the ability to be about as loud as any acoustic instrument can be. In some cases, they can even produce a natural sound louder than an instrument that requires amplification. And so there are a lot of dynamic options that the drummer has. So to recap, the drummer's role, apart from creating and rhythm and keeping time, which is everyone's role, it's to shape the melody, to cocoon the melody, to be the womb of the melody, and to use dynamics and sound choices and sound variations and sound manipulations to create an interesting environment that other instruments, particularly those incapable of producing the loud sounds a drum can produce, it gives them the cues on where to go. A good drummer is essentially fulfilling a role similar to a maestro. So again, rhythm is one part of it. In a non-conducted ensemble, everyone else has a role to fill. But the ideas about dynamics and about melody shape, which are a conductor's role, those are not exclusively, but they're heavily a drummer's role in a non conducted ensemble. Water break. Now then, how do we get from that to Frank Sinatra? Well, Frank Sinatra uses his voice to do what drummers do because, in general, in Frank Sinatra's arrangements, the drums are usually very restrained. And there's a reason for that. His voice is fulfilling the role of the drummer, and this is shaping the melody, using that melodious shape to play games, interesting musical games with the rhythm, creating musical ideas where rhythm and melody intersect. And of course, dynamics. A huge part of what Frank Sinatra does with his voice, a huge part of what drummers do with their sticks, hands, legs, and any other appendage which you might want to use to strike a percussion instrument. Now, you can tell that Sinatra has a keen sense of a drummer's role by both listening to him, and you can confirm it by watching him because his hand movements, his leg movements, his subtle gyrations are all the kinds of things that I recognize as a percussion man, as a drummer. I don't really play much anymore, but it's like falling off a bicycle, getting kicked by a horse. Never really forget it. And so he's feeling the music the way a drummer feels it. You develop a sense for these things, and you can see, he's making physical movements of a certain nature because he's thinking in the language of percussion. In the same way that if you're listening to the lyrics of Antonio Carlos Jobim, you're thinking in the language of Portuguese. There you go. So Sinatra has an amazing ability to shape melody on the fly. He doesn't necessarily know where he's going with it, the way some singers do, but because he has a keen attention to dynamics and to rhythm, he's able to let the melody take itself where it wants to go without falling out of the rhythm of the piece. And this includes a use of tempo rubato, which is often very present in Sinatra's phrasing, his vocal phrasing. And rubato is when you navigate the rhythm outside of the pulse. It's not a concept that's necessarily too common in a lot of non-European classical music styles, but in European classical music style, rubato is everything because in European music, it's the melody that guides the tempo, where in most other classical traditions, think raga, it's the tempo, the rhythm that guides the melody and the chords. So Sinatra, again, he has this in either. I'm not sure if it's intuition, if it's something he studied, but he's got it. I think with a lot of Sinatra, he was just a pure musical genius operating in great part on an intuitive basis. And insofar as that's the case, he lets the melody breathe. It's not a strict march like regimental relationship between the melody and the rhythm. But again, what makes a good drummer different than a mediocre drummer? Someone who always lands on one. So, between one and four, you can do what you want, but if you land on the one that's awaiting you in the next measure or so, the next bar, then you're going to be okay. Always land on one. And Frank Sinatra, in his singing, is always able to do it. He's playing footsie between the rhythm and the melody, always lands on one. Doesn't matter where he takes the melody line, doesn't matter how much he syncopates, how much he slows himself down, tempo rubato wise, or even speeds himself up. He always lands on the one, which makes the job of the conductors, of the conducted ensembles that Sinatra often performed with, it makes this person's job easier because Sinatra's voice does what a conductor would do to a vocalist who takes less charge. But because of this, because Sinatra is a percussionist and a conductor and a vocalist all in one, it makes the life of everyone around him easy. The musicians are never worried that they need to speed up or slow down to meet him at one. And the conductor of the ensemble is never worried that he needs to worry about the singer going off on a tangent if he doesn't stick to a regimented beat, because he knows Sinatra's got this. He can follow, but he's, of course, famous for leading. And this is one of the things that really makes Sinatra unique. And it's one of the things that likewise makes drummers unique. Because, like I said, if a drummer's job is just to keep time, one, why have a drummer at all? Why not have a Linn drum machine, a glorified metronome? And in the 80s, a lot of bands decided, yeah, why do we need a drummer? But when you have a good drummer, a drummer is still very useful, even in a world with click tracks and drum machines, because of the real role of the drummer that I've talked about, the shaping of the melody, the framing of the dynamics. And Sinatra understands this. So look at the great drummers, the Art Blakeys, the Tony Williamses, the Billy Cobhams, the Bill Brufords, the John Bonhams, all of these people in different genres, the Buddy Riches, the Krupas, every old and young, all of them. All of these drummers know about melody because they're painting the melody across their drum set like a paintbrush, or like a maestro in an orchestra paints the melody with his hands. But they never miss one. They always land on one, whether they're syncopating things, and sometimes the syncopation's extreme, whether they're doing an odd meter that's being played over an even meter that the guitarist or someone else in the band is doing. No matter what crazy tricks these truly exceptional drummers, Alphonse Mouzon, Lenny White, the Liz Carl Palmer, famous for rushing, but he still finds one. What these drummers do, they land on one. And that is what Sinatra does with his vocals. Now, a bad drummer, but someone who aspires to be a good drummer, is someone who say, look, I don't want to be a second-rate metronomic timekeeper. I don't want to be, a Linn drum machine, but one who's, taking all the beer from the cooler. Mr. Linn is very well behaved in that regard. So I'm going to aspire to be like the Cobhams and the Blakeys and the Williamses and the Brufords and all of these great people that we all know and love. And they fail because they miss one. And when a drummer doesn't land on one, much like a rocket ship from Elon not landing in, the arms that cradle around it, you're going to have a bad time. And if you're good enough, if the other musicians are good enough, they can eventually all race to get to one somehow, but it's not going to be enjoyable. It's going to feel chaotic. The audience will get uncomfortable. They'll start to leave. They'll start to, seek controlled substances. So, from a man that's sort of leaning against the dumpster out back like that, rather than tipping their bartenders generously, the band thereby gets fired and everyone has a lousy day, apart from the drug dealer himself. We don't want that. We want everyone to have a good day, including the drug dealer. It's a free show, folks. It's a free show. So That's what a mediocre drummer does, and it's not comfortable. But when you're really, really good, you can combine your sense of melody, your the tricks that you use, speed and dynamics to create, to then land on one. And again, a good vocalists have this, but I cannot think of any vocalist in a contemporary style, meaning a non-classical style, that could do it the way that the chairman of the board was able to do it. And again, he uses it to build suspense because sometimes you think, oh shit, he's really on a melodious and rhythmic tangent. Is he ever going to get to one? He always does, live and in the studio. And speaking of the studio, this is one of the reasons why Sinatra always liked to record live. And by this, I don't mean a live recording with an audience, but when he was in the studio, he wanted his vocal tracks recorded with the orchestra in the same studio, playing at the same time. And he continued this well into the age of multi track recording, when it became almost standard for singers across many genres to sing to a orchestral track or a backing track from a rock band or a jazz band or what have you, a country and western band. It became a habit where, let's say, the ensemble would record the music to a click track, and then the singer would do multiple vocal takes to that same background track, the same backing track, until the singer got it right. Not with Frank. Frank always recorded, with one exception of the album Watertown, which was done for various other reasons, but all the other things he ever recorded, it was done with the band and Frank, the vocalist, in the same room. And this is because there needs to be this feeling of give and take, push or pull. The orchestra needs to respond to Frank's rhythmic, melodious, and dynamic leadership, the way that they would normally respond to their maestro. And you can't have that if it's pre recorded. So it's that symbiotic effect that was so very effective for Sinatra. And another way that you know that he had this drummer's, gift, is that he was able to do this on songs that were very legato, and he was also able to do them with songs that have a really strong backbeat, songs like That's Life. No matter what the song, he was able to use this talent of his to shape the melody, to use the melody to then shape the rhythm, control the dynamics, but always land on one. And don't get me wrong, all musicians ought to land on one, but in an ensemble, the dynamic nature of the band means that the drummer is someone who usually leads in this capacity. And when the drummer doesn't find one, or when the vocalist doesn't, it's always going, those two people, if they miss one, are going to be the most obvious. The drummer, because of the dynamics of the drums, and vocals, because in most forms of modern pop music, the vocalist is generally the star attraction. And therefore, the audience will both either consciously or subliminally be paying more attention to the vocalist in a traditional pop track than they will, let's say, the bass player. So Sinatra had all of these gifts, and he had them exponentially more so than even other great singers and even many good or even some great drummers. So if you really want to learn the role of a drummer and what a drummer's place in an ensemble is, you can, yeah, learn from the great drummers, but also learn from Frank Sinatra. Because when you hear this being done by a vocalist, something might click, because you won't be thinking, oh, did he do a flamacue? Did he do a paradiddle? I wonder, why is he using the ride cymbal and not the hi-hat? You won't be asking yourselves those questions. That are distractions in the long term, in terms of learning how to make yourself a better drummer. You'll be listening to the melody, the rhythm, the dynamics, and how all of these things intersect and consciously and unconsciously influence each other. The genius of Frank Sinatra. So brilliant at so many levels. Listen to him today. And if you want to know what my favorite Sinatra albums are, you can listen to my video on which I explain all of that. As always, like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.